Misinformation is everywhere these days. Whether that's willfully spread propaganda, video essayists doing lazy research or just plain making stuff up, or even someone just lying for shits and gigs.
So what can you do about it?
Well, I did my uni dissertation on propaganda and I also studied critical thinking. So in this video, I'll tell you the 5 most important tips you can learn that the propagandists don't want you to know.
I'll talk a little bit about why critical thinking is important, what it even is, and go over how to apply these tips in real life.
From here onwards, the pacing of the video is quite swift, so anytime if you need to, feel free to pause the video to read what's on screen, or go back if you missed something.
Whenever you consume information, you are being subjected to the bias of whoever is telling you. There are no neutral sources of information, and if someone tries to tell you otherwise, it's a red flag. They're probably lying, or at least bending the truth to fit their own agenda. Even when someone is trying their best to be neutral, they still have an underlying unconscious bias that stems from their perspective and experiences. You can think of critical thinking as your own personal quality control for information. When you think critically about something, you're basically just not taking it at face value. It's like analysing literature in English classes. Some people think the curtain is red and that's just it. But the curtain is red for a fucking reason, okay? Writers choose words on purpose. It's their job. I'll die on this hill. Anyway. I see lots of people on the internet assume they're already critical thinkers. But honestly, it's not a skill most people are good at. Think about it. Critically, if you will. If you're the government, and you largely control what gets taught in schools, why would you teach students to actively question you? Very few people in the UK actually study critical thinking at any point during their education. And it's the same elsewhere. In 2018, the Reboot Foundation surveyed Americans, and while 90% of respondents said they thought it was an important skill that should be taught, only 60% had ever learned anything about it in school. And it's basically the same globally. In this worldwide study, 93% of teachers believed critical thinking was important, but only 21% said they had the resources to teach it, with only 17% ever having had any training on it. So yeah, not to get all tinfoil hat about it, but your government probably doesn't want you to understand how to think critically. After all, they do spend a lot of money on propaganda. And if you're harder to persuade, you're harder to control. So let's get into it. The tips that will stop the government or anyone else putting their nasty propaganda worms in your brain. Introducing the Raven criteria. Reputation is very important. If a courier has a reputation for stealing valuable packages, you're hardly going to book them to deliver your new Astarian body pillow, are you? So how do you apply this to a real life example? You should ask yourself questions like, have they been consistently accurate in the past in similar situations? Are they considered honest and trustworthy? Are they in a relevant position of authority, i.e. do they have knowledge of the topic at hand? If the answers are mostly yes, that's a good sign. But that's it, a sign. A good reputation alone doesn't prove anything, and if someone expects you to believe them solely based on reputation, that could also be a red flag. Plenty of people and organisations have good reputations before a fall from grace, or before it's discovered that they weren't trustworthy at all. You might be thinking, well, all the news sources I use have good reputations, and while that's generally true, a good reputation can also be one of the best methods of laundering propaganda. I mean, you're not going to trust a bad reputation in the first place, right? Think about it. The rich and famous who commit crimes often get away with it because of their reputations. And money, which news organisations have. That's it for the section on reputation. Ability to observe is a big one, because a lot of fake news relies on people not considering whether the person or the media outlet reporting on something has actually observed and verified the thing in question. Think of it like a game of telephone. The more the information gets passed along, the more chances it has to be skewed or misinterpreted. Even once can be enough. So when a journalist reports on something happening in a country thousands of miles away, they've not actually observed what they're reporting on for themselves. They're relying on someone else telling them. This causes mistakes with mainstream, supposedly reputable news outlets more often than they'd like to admit. Here's one example of the BBC having to correct a claim made on air that the reporter would not have got wrong if they had observed the events themselves.
Or at the very least, tried harder to verify it. On to the next section.
A vested interest is a reason that someone has to present certain information, or to present that information in a certain way. That reason could be ideological. It could be fame, money, recognition. Let's say you're buying a used car. The salesman tells you the car's in great shape, no need to look inside, or test drive it. Should you trust him? Of course not. He has a vested interest in selling you the car. He gets a commission for it. Remember, ASAP. All salespeople are bloody lying to you. You should try to check the funding for a source of information. This can usually tell you a lot. You can usually find this by either looking at the About page on their website, using Wikipedia, or simply by Googling the source's name and funding. A great real-life example of vested interest was when Elon Musk tweeted about Dogecoin. If you don't know, he had Dogecoin, he tweeted about it, the price went up, so he made money. That's it. That's the vested interest section. Expertise is an important part of the criteria to consider. Though it's not technically necessary, as someone could report something accurately without needing to be an expert. Regardless, you should be more willing to trust your doctor with your prostate and your plumber with your pipes. You really don't want to get them mixed up, trust me. As always, it's important to remember the other criteria here. Maybe your plumber charges hourly rates, so he's taking his time to fix stuff. And maybe he insists you need the most expensive replacement parts. He has a vested interest. Get? Vested interest? Vest? And remember, being a journalist doesn't make someone an expert on the topic they're reporting on. And you should be very wary whenever something cites experts without specifically telling you who the experts are and giving you background information on them. Here's why. BBC Verify is the BBC's supposed fact-checking and disinformation busting service. In this article, however, they cite 3 experts on the topic of who bombed a hospital in Gaza, failing to mention that every expert they cite has direct ties with Israel, military allies of Israel, and related think tanks. Sus.
Now for the section on neutrality.
As I said before, no one is truly unbiased, but that doesn't mean they can't aim to be as unbiased as possible. If my 2 best friends have a boxing match, I'm going to try to be pretty neutral about who I want to win, or one of them is going to be pissed. If my dad goes back in time to have a boxing match with Hitler, I'm obviously going to cheer for my father. Go Dad. Something I see a lot is the idea that Wikipedia is neutral because anyone can edit it. Well, that sounds great, but I don't trust just anyone and neither should you. So who is editing Wikipedia? Well, mostly dudes, and judging by the locations, mostly white dudes, often retired. So we can already see that if they were to live in a society that has not gotten rid of racism or misogyny, they might be prone to a point of view corresponding with the system that benefits them. Most editors from the US are probably pro-US. Most from Russia are probably pro-Russia, just as a general rule. You might be saying, but facts are facts. Well, everything on Wikipedia has to have a source. And yeah, they do kind of vet their sources and have a list of deprecated sources that you're generally not supposed to use on there. Still, I've seen some of these being used. Lots of them are there fairly, but there's blatant propaganda outlets that aren't on there, like RFA, which is an offshoot from the CIA. This gets cited on Wikipedia all the time. But it's not just that old white dudes are massively overrepresented as Wikipedia editors. A bigger problem is that 80% of all edits are made by 1% of all users. So actually the bulk of English Wikipedia is edited by a tiny minority, who essentially control 80% of the world's most popular information source. Now to me, that sounds worth investigating, rather than trusting blindly. So I did some more investigation, but that's for another video. For a little taste of that, here's evidence of the CIA, FBI, NYPD, Vatican, BP, Facebook, Axios, and NBC all getting caught editing Wikipedia for their own benefit. Oh, and here's a website where corporations or individuals can pay to have their Wikipedia records cleaned up, not by lying, apparently anyway, but by telling the truth sneakily. I mean, surely that's not allowed on Wikipedia. Oh, it is. Okay. Anyway. Here's Wikipedia's founder a while ago editing the page for Wikipedia on Wikipedia to cut out the name of his co-founder and programmer of Wikipedia. And here he is telling the US Senate he's grateful to be here today to testify about the potential for the Wikipedia model of collaboration and information sharing which may be helpful to government operations and homeland security. So yeah, not exactly neutral. So what have you learned? Well, if you just learnt that you can't actually trust institutions like the BBC and Wikipedia like you thought you could, and existential crisis is setting in as you begin to lose faith in everything around you, not to worry. You've also learned that the Raven criteria is a great way to get started truly thinking about not just sources of information, but the world around you. If you're still breaking down about the other thing, here's some bonus tips to help you out. Another thing you should be wary of is when the media get together to uncritically parrot the same thing. It's a telltale sign that there's some sort of spooky agenda behind what's being said. You could say it's
dangerous to our democracy.
It's often also worth checking who agrees with and who is amplifying the information that's being reported. Use the Raven criteria not just on the source of information, but also on those who agree with that information. Are they agreeing because it's right, or because they have the same motives with the source? The best tip I can give you is don't stop learning here. I recommend Propaganda by Edward Bernays, an evil man who essentially invented modern propaganda and called it public relations. Brilliant, really. Inventing Reality by Michael Parenti, which came out before Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent and is basically just better. I also can't recommend highly enough Propaganda, a documentary by Slavko Martinov, told from the perspective of documentary makers from North Korea. This documentary is extremely well made and honestly it will change the way you see the world. Finally, I recommend signing up for a critical thinking class either online or at your local college. Failing that, this YouTube series is actually pretty good. The Raven criteria isn't the arbiter of all truth, but it will give you a much better idea of whether you should believe something. Remember, everyone is trying to persuade you of something. Like me, right now, trying to persuade you not to be neutral and to like to improve the reputation of this video and show your vested interest in cool, funny, informative and based videos like this. and subscribe to give yourself the ability to observe more videos about my expertise. If you leave a comment to help, then my face will not be neutral because I will have a cute smile when I read your lovely comments. Is that what you want? You want to make me happy for free? You'd better comment, like and subscribe then. That would make me really happy. Thanks for watching.